We previously discovered that the difference between the boss that you're going to work for because you have to and the boss you're going to work for because you want to was not their behavior, but their intent. We argued that the key issue was the boss's sincerity. While this is insightful and useful, it also opens us up to a significant challenge. And that is the view that nobody else can judge one's sincerity. I've often heard people say that. So, how are they going to know? How are they going to know whether I'm manipulating them or I'm being sincere? The examination that you've just done regarding your best boss and worst boss experiences suggests that actually we do have a criterion that we operate that is concerned with establishing whether somebody's sincere with us or not. So the view that no one can judge my sincerity is in fact quite flawed, because in fact they can. And the reason for this is really straightforward. It's when in any situation that you're in, there's always two variables that are operative. There's what you want from the other and what you should contribute to the other. Very often those two things are not at all the same. And people judge your sincerity based on the degree to which you're able to act on the basis of what you should be contributing to the other, particularly in situations where it contradicts your own needs to do so. In the first instance, this distinction between what's in my own interest and what should I contribute is manifest in one's own expectations. In a sense, somebody who's here to contribute is able to contradict their own expectations in order to be generous. Some of the examples that you raised may, for example, have reflected a boss from hell being somebody who was incapable of listening. Now that suggests the following. You must have had an experience with in the past where you tried to explain something to somebody and they've answered you back before you finish speaking. Clearly, when that happens, there really are two agendas in the room. There's your agenda and there's the other person's agenda. And while the other person is answering you back, what they're actually giving attention to is their own agenda. What you really want the person to do with their agenda before they're in the position to be able to give attention to yours is that they should suspend it, which suggests that listening is actually a moral skill. It's about the ability to suspend one's own agenda in order to give attention to the agenda of the other in the situation that you're in. You can describe giving as that ability. Giving is the ability to suspend one's own agenda for the agenda of the other in the situation that you're in. So in the first instance, our sincerity is tested by our capacity to act on the basis of what the other person's agenda is rather than our own. So a boss from heaven, for example, or a really good boss, may be described as somebody who was forbearing when you had a personal crisis, or was able to be supportive when you were under undue pressure. However, this ability to suspend one's own agenda for the agenda of the other can also be refined as an understanding that the boss who's here to give can contradict his own needs and be courageous. In a sense, what we're arguing here is that there's a difference between needs and values. If you consider honesty, for example, as a value, honesty means truthfulness. And if you ask somebody, for example, where they live, and they tell you truthfully that they live in Johannesburg, you've not necessarily demonstrated anything about their honesty at all, because there's no harm to them to speak the truth about where they live. If, however, you ask the person about something that could potentially harm their own interests and they still speak the truth, the question is, have you now demonstrated something about their honesty? And clearly you have, which suggests that you only test somebody's honesty when they're able to stay honest when it contradicts their own needs to do so. In other words, values refer to an order of reality which is bigger than one's own need, against which you put your own needs second for. Now, if you look at a boss from hell, for example, it's quite conceivable that this person would, for instance, do something completely unjust to a subordinate in order to keep his own job. So he may, for example, take the credit of what a subordinate has done. Or he might let the subordinate carry the can for a decision that he himself took. A boss from heaven, on the other hand, would be somebody who would, for example, stand up for a subordinate when somebody in the organization was trying to pursue that subordinate unfairly. Would speak the truth in defense of the subordinate even if it harmed their own career. So this suggests that there's a very definite sincerity rule that operates. The sincerity rule says the only measure I have of the degree to which you are sincere with me is the degree to which you are willing to suspend your own agenda for what is right. So this suggests that you can't lie about your sincerity. If we said the difference between the boss that you're going to work for because you have to and the boss that you're going to work for because you want to is their intent, this does not suggest that you can't demonstrate what their intent is. Because very quickly somebody demonstrates what they're sincere about. Over a period of time, you watch people and you see them acting in situations where what is in their own interest and what's the right thing to do is not the same. And when they frequently act on the basis of what's in their own interest rather than doing what's right, you cease to trust that person. You recognize them as being insincere. You recognize them as being there for themselves and not to make a contribution. So the final insight to this is that, in a sense, the very last person that you can trust with regard to your intent is yourself. And the reason for this is that we're very good at justifying our own intent. We can always find a good rationale for acting in situations or acting in ways which are in the brazen pursuit of our own interests. So in a sense, the most trustworthy arbiters of our sincerity is not ourselves, but it's people around us who know us reasonably. And these are more than likely to be our subordinates. They see us act in situations where what is in our own interests and what is the right thing to do is not the same. It is the degree to which we act on the basis of our own interest is the degree to which they conclude that they can't trust us and they therefore have to work for us because they have to. The degree to which we act on the basis of what is right, even when it harms us to do so, is the degree to which they understand that they can trust us and therefore work for us because they want to.